Hello, and welcome to the 2026 Virtual Cook Family Gathering. We're so happy that you could join us this evening. We're going to discuss Phineas Wolcott Cook's time in Michigan. We're going to explore the areas that the Cooks and the Howlands lived, tell you stories that happened in those areas, and also update you about some new research done on Phineas's family recently. At the end of our presentation about our shared Michigan heritage, we will also update you on publications initiated recently by the Cook Family Organization, including a children's book about Phineas's time in Michigan, news about our involvement with the Sons of the American Revolution organization, and tease you with our plans for next year's in-person gathering in Salt Lake City on Saturday, August 14th, 2027. So mark the date now. We're working on getting us private tours of some special buildings downtown that Phineas helped build, unveiling a bust of Phineas in a special pioneer location, and we'll have some speakers and fun family time. So please mark it on your calendar and plan to join us on August 14th next year in Salt Lake City. It'll be in conjunction with the temple being open for an open house. So if your family wants to do that, do it around the same time as the Cook family reunion. So I'm Marcia Marshall, and I am the current Phineas Wolcott Cook Family Organization Board President. I grew up in Michigan, in Midland, Michigan, and I currently live in Troy, Michigan with my husband and children. That's near Detroit. I am especially excited to share with you this lovely state and stories about our family heritage here. I didn't grow up in Michigan because the Cooks were here. It was my parents who returned to Michigan from Salt Lake City early in their marriage, and that brought my line of the Cook descendants full circle back to where Phineas was first introduced to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I'm excited to share that story with you. You may remember that last year's virtual gathering featured Cook descendant Bryson Cook on site at Phineas's birthplace in Goshen, Connecticut. He discussed the many generations of Cooks who had lived in Goshen, Connecticut. For our line of Cooks, that ended in 1837 when the Cook land that Phineas Sr. lived on was sold. And he and his wife Irene Churchill Cook took their family to start a new life in Michigan. Our Phineas Wolcott Cook's father, Phineas Sr., came to Michigan alone with his son-in-law at first, son-in-law Sam and Hall, who was married to Phineas's sister, Eliza Cook. They bought land in Kalamazoo County in the southwest part of Michigan. They were near a lake called Gull Lake, and their settlement was called Gull Corners in Richland Township. We believe that this was Phineas Sr.'s land in this area. It's still a rural part of Michigan with farms and woods and some new developments. But back in the 1830s, the area was described as having rolling prairies and rich farmland. In ensuing years, the city of Kalamazoo, about 10 miles away, saw more development of industry and commerce, but Richland remained sparsely populated. It was known as the leading agricultural township in the county. Today, there are about 9,000 people living in Richland Township, and under 1,000 of them live in Richland City proper. In comparison, there are about 73,000 people living in the city of Kalamazoo. Now, Phineas wrote in his memoirs, "In the fall of 1837, I started with my oldest brother, Daniel, and his family for Michigan. We had a hard journey. It took us 7 days to cross Lake Erie in storms and gales, which seemed at times to threaten us with destruction. But the Lord brought us to land in the town of Toledo. That night, for the first time, I had the ague and fever. The next day we took the cars, or a train, and came to Adrian and proceeded to Daniel's brother-in-law's place. We stayed there 5 days to rest, and then he and I left on foot for Kalamazoo, where Father was, 100 miles distant. We traveled 3.5 days and arrived safely, only our feet were blistered from head to toe. This was the 17th day of October, 1837. This was a hard and toilsome journey, but we were thankful when we came to the end of it. We found Father sick with the ague and fever, and also all the rest. We found them on the prairie town of Richland, about 10 miles north from Kalamazoo. Upon arrival, Phineas commenced clearing the land with his father for wheat fields. He hired out to other people in the community also to make money to pay back his mother for the $36 he had needed to make the journey. He said, "I volunteered my service to be housekeeper for Father till Mother and the girls came, which we looked for soon. Accordingly, I continued in this employment for 6 weeks. I could get breakfast for 5 men and get my work done by 9 o'clock and go out and help him until 11 o'clock and then go to the house and get dinner and by 1 o'clock be ready to go out with the men and labor in the field until 5 in the afternoon and then get supper and do up my work by bedtime. We were clearing and burning logs and wood for wheat. In this way, I labored with untiring diligence, hoping to obtain a permanent home for my father's family until Mother and Darius and Marianne and Harriet came at last on 12th of July, 1838. When they came, they hardly knew me. I was so thin in flesh. Soon after this, my appetite began to fail, but my health was much better than common. Phineas's father had suggested that Phineas try to get married so they could have someone else to keep house for them. Around this time, he became acquainted with a man who had a lovely young daughter named Annalisa. Then Phineas's father scolded him for wanting to get married too young. This is the location of Henry Howland's mill that he built with his brother, Edward K. Howland. They came here together. Here's what Phineas wrote about Henry. In the spring of 1838, I hired to a man by the name of Henry Howland for $15 per month. He afterward became my father-in-law. Just before the time was up, I asked him for his daughter, Annalisa. After obtaining his consent, we were agreed to be married in 2 years. Just east of Richland, about 7 miles away in Ross Township, where we are now, Henry Howland and his family had moved from New York to the area, first settled by Henry's brother Edward in 1834. The area became known as Howlandsburg, though today it is called Augusta. Henry was a millwright, and he and his brother built a grist mill, which grinds grains, and a lumber mill, which they say furnished the whole area with most of its home building lumber for the earliest homes in this part of Kalamazoo County. Our young Phineas was only 18 years old when he became acquainted with Annalisa Howland. She was the 4th child of Henry and Phoebe Baker Howland. They had 7 children, and really Annalisa was 4th or 5th, as those two were twins. She had a twin sister named Anne Maria. She had 2 older brothers who moved, one of them moved here with the family and the other stayed in New York. And she had 2 younger sisters who moved here with the family. Henry settled here with his brother Edward and sister Susanna Howland, married to James Bailey, and a cousin, Permelia Howland, married to Henry Sherman. The Shermans and the Baileys were big names in this area for some time to come. Henry ended up leaving Michigan in 1850, and the other Howlands and Baileys and Shermans remained in the area. Phineas related one account in his memoirs that shows how much he enjoyed and appreciated Annalisa's company. He said, "After about 2 weeks from the time that I first got over the fever and ague, I was taken again with the ague, which lasted me about 9 months. Except at intervals, I would break it up. About January or February, I was taken with the inflammatory rheumatism, which lasted me nearly all summer. In the month of May, I had 2 setons put in, one in each leg, between my ankle and knee. They proved to do me much good. In those times, I saw much sorrow. My head was all bare. My hair had all come out and left it naked as I was born. After I had been sick 3 or 4 days, I sent for Annalisa to come and see me. I sent by William Daly, a young man of my acquaintance and one of the neighbors. When he came to her house and saw Annalisa, she felt a delicacy about it, thinking that people would talk about her coming to see me. Her sister Anne Maria wanted to come, so she came. Much to my disappointment and dissatisfaction, as soon as I heard her voice in the other room, I immediately told her to go home and send Annalisa, for it was her that I wanted to see. After staying all night, in the morning she started for my house, and in a short time Annalisa came. But I did not know her until near night. The first that I knew of her was when she was helping Mother move her bed, which was standing in the opposite side of the room from mine. she had had her bed moved 2 or 3 times the same day, and she was teasing Annalisa to turn the room upside down. I saw how childish Mother was, for she had had the ague. And immediately I told her to stop moving things, for it troubled me and it did Mother no good. So she sat down by my bed and kept the flies off for me, as she had been doing while there, or since she told me. I had watches all night, or sitters who would stay with him. The night she was there, Annalisa heard me groaning. She got up and looked down through the cracks of the floor, discovered the watches were both asleep, and mosquitoes were tormenting me to distraction, having no power to resist them. She immediately awoke Mary Ann, my sister, and they came down and discharged the watches, took care of me themselves. Phineas and Annalisa were married at Annalisa's parents' house in a double wedding with her twin sister, Anne Maria, and Washington Heath, who subsequently moved to the Detroit area. We think we know where this house was located, but it's on a very busy street, so we won't film there, and it's hidden by a lot of trees. But here are some old pictures of the house. This one taken in 1935 when Alonzo Laker, or A.L. Cook, visited here with his son Noel. Phineas recorded about his wedding. The first day of January 1840, I was married. By this time, all had agreed to the match, and all went to the wedding and had a good time. Our fathers and mothers were both present. They stayed till 2 o'clock in the morning, ate and drank and made themselves quite merry. When they retired, they wished us all the happiness we desired. But his brother Darius and his lady, who he intended to marry at that time, because Annalisa did not invite her until the day before the wedding, thought that she did not use them very well. So after we were married and the dainties were passed around, they left and went out through the back way. And as they passed, they being by themselves, they filled their pockets and handkerchiefs full of goodies and packed it off without asking any odds, so that when we came to hand round the second time, we had but little or none to hand around. They must have taken at least a half or 3/4 of a bushel of the best loaves of pound cake and pies and other things which were prepared for a second passing. But it all passed off, and I suppose they thought we never missed it, for nothing was said. The next morning, he records, our father came into our room to bid us good morning and brought us some hot toddy to drink, much satisfied with his new sons. That night we had an infare at my father's. All things passed off tolerably well. Incidentally, these twin girls having a double wedding has caused some confusion on Family Search, because these two girls with very similar names, born on the same day and married on the same day, are often merged together. But I'm telling you, so you will know, they were two separate people. And we need to pass the word so they don't get combined into one anymore. Let me tell you some more about the Howlands. Anne Maria, her twin, had the distinction of being the first teacher at the Howlandsburg School, just down the road from here. She had 7 children herself, and she would die young at the age of 36 in 1858. 4 of her children died either before her or one just a month after her. Annalisa kept in touch with her twin daughter's daughter, named Jeannie Ledyard, until the end of her life, exchanging letters with her, and Jeannie would also send Annalisa money to help the family out. I like to think this was Annalisa's way of staying in touch with her very special twin sister. Henry Howland lived in this area until 1849 or 50, when he caught gold fever and moved to Stockton, California. He passed through Salt Lake City on the way and visited Phineas and Annalisa, but he couldn't persuade them to join him in California, as he did eventually persuade many of his other children. Phineas tried to persuade him toward Mormonism, but Henry, Phineas wrote, hoping to become wealthy in gold, that was all they thought of. We don't know if Henry and Phoebe struck gold, but their land purchases did make them a good deal of money. He owned 1,200 acres just west of Linden and south of Lockford, California, in the Stockton area. Phoebe and a couple of the children joined Henry traveling by boat from New York State through the Isthmus of Panama and over to California in 1862, so about 12 years after Henry left. Phoebe then died there in 1868. Phineas and Annalisa visited Henry Howland in California just after her mother died to receive her portion of her father's inheritance. Henry Howland lived there until he died in 1871, and they are both buried in the Linden Cemetery in San Joaquin County, California. Phineas and Annalisa moved around quite a bit in their first years of marriage. At times, they lived with each of their parents, as Phineas did odd jobs in the area, such as building barns and houses, mills, and building furniture, and other carpentry work. At one job site, he was putting a roof on a house for a young man named Philip Leonard, who told Phineas that he needed a wife. Phineas told him about his sister Harriet, who needed a husband. Phineas wrote, "If he was a good man, I told him he might have her." They met, Harriet and Philip, and were married 2.5 weeks later. Things moved fast on the frontier, no time to waste. Phineas and Annalisa had their first child a year after they were married, Charlotte, born January 7th, 1841. She moved west to winter quarters with them and ended up dying there of sickness and is buried along with her new baby sister, Aurelia, who was born in winter quarters. They are both in the winter quarters cemetery, and as children, they are both listed on the plaque and statue there of all the children who were buried in the cemetery there. Phineas and Annalisa, living near the Howlands, rented a house from her uncle Edward Howland for $40 a year when their son Daniel Webster was born on October 5th, 1843. He wasn't a healthy child, and he lived just under 2 years. When he died, they buried him near the Howlands Mill, perhaps somewhere right here. His grave is not marked. The couple would have one more child, Harriet, in Michigan, in October of 1845, just after they joined the church. Harriet lived to a ripe old age, had 8 children, and at the end of Annalisa's life, Harriet lived near her and took care of her until Annalisa's death, and that was in Garden City, Utah. And Annalisa died in 1896. Harriet was described as a really lovely, kind, and determined woman. We are at the Howlandsburg Cemetery in what was then Howlandsburg, Michigan, now Augusta, Michigan, down the road from where Annalisa and her parents lived. There are some Howlands here, but not Annalisa's family or immediate family. This is the burial place of Edward K. Howland. He came here with Annalisa's father, Henry Howland, back in 1835 or 6. They came a little before the Cooks. Edward Knowlton Howland was Annalisa's uncle, and he came with his son Simpson Howland, who's buried behind me. He was very prominent in the community, stayed here even after Henry Howland left, and many of his family members are buried. In the spring of 1843, Phineas and Annalisa and their little Charlotte moved to Marshall, Michigan in Calhoun County, just west of Kalamazoo County, to do some long-term construction work. We are in a place called the National House Inn that was built in Marshall in 1835. So this building was standing when Phineas and Annalisa rode into town. It even has the original 1835 wood floor. But here in Marshall, Phineas worked for Henry Sherman to do some long-term construction work. But he found once he was here that Sherman was a drunk who didn't follow through with his word. The family rented a house next to a couple named Lewis and Mrs. Whitney, who had a baby boy. Both the Whitneys got very ill, and Phineas and Annalisa spent 3 long weeks nursing them back to health. Phineas wrote, "We were nearly worn out being up night and day, which we thought at that time was a deed of charity, but our reward was quite a different sort." Meanwhile, Phineas had quite a bit of drama about the work he was doing, or supposed to be doing, and he ended up losing a lot of money as they stalled for him to start this work. He said, "I concluded to get off the best way I could. At this time, Annalisa was quite unwell, and I had Whitney and wife to board and could not get clear of them without turning them out of doors. And for the sake of his wife and child, about 2 years old, I determined to bear with him. His wife was not very well, and the child was quite sickly. We had moved out of our house and rented one of a man by the name of Hinky, and this was a smaller house than the one we left. I thought it would be more comfortable for my little family than the former, and my plan was to leave Whitney in the former rental house. But to my surprise, when we had got loaded up, they were also ready to go along with us. I now saw no other way but to keep them all winter without pay, for it was impossible to get him to work, for he was too lazy. However, I did succeed in getting him to work a few days, but he did not pay me for only 2 weeks' board for himself and wife. Under these perplexing circumstances, I determined to take Annalisa to her father's to stay until I could get matters settled. We were obliged to leave the new stove that I had been paid for some work that I had done. We left it with Whitney until I could get home. Later, I went for my stove, but Whitney had moved into another house and had taken the stove with them. I at last found him, and he was perfectly indifferent, and his wife was quite as much as so herself. They did, however, promise me that they would come and bring it out in 4 weeks, and then without fail. As I had no other way to carry it, I thought I would try them again, for I thought that after I had shown them so much kindness that they could not have a conscience to deceive me. However, at the end of the time, I looked for a fulfillment of those promises, but I looked in vain. At the end of 6 weeks, I started after it. When I arrived there, I found him in the same place I left him. I told them that I had come after my stove. His wife told me she could not live without it. But I told her I should take it in a day or two, and they could look around in that time and get another. He went directly to his landlord, told them all that I had said, and they contrived a plan to take it from me. He went, I'll let you read all the other details of his very juicy story in the Phineas volume. But suffice it to say, Phineas did not get his stove back. His father-in-law advised him to go home and let them work at it and give them the stove to get clear of the mess. A while after this, I heard, he said, the death of Whitney's child and his wife, and soon after he also died, a poor vagabond. I have to say, Phineas said, that I owe none of them anything. I found the Whitneys at the Oak Ridge Cemetery in Marshall, Michigan. Mrs. Whitney died in August of 1844, and 3-year-old child Whitney died that same month. Mr. Whitney died a year later. No headstones exist for any of them. Although their time in Marshall, Michigan wasn't positive, Marshall is a lovely city. It almost became the state capital, being narrowly beat out by Lansing, Michigan. It was a major stop on the way from Detroit to Chicago. Today it's a small town of 68,000 people. Several very old stately homes are still standing in Marshall and give historic tours. Backing up a bit, let's explore Phineas Wolcott Cook's spiritual journey. We'll go back to the time that he was adjusting to his new life in Michigan. When our young Phineas was 19 years old, he had a remarkable experience when he had taken very sick. Phineas wrote, "I lay in agony all night, but made no noise. In the morning they called me to breakfast, but I could not get up, and it was soon discovered that I was sick. The third day I was helpless. The doctor was sent for immediately, and he began to give me calomel, dose after dose, once in 2 hours trying to saturate me, but could not. Thus I continued for 9 days, helpless and senseless. The neighbors who came in all thought that I was about to leave them. My legs became cold and lifeless to my body 3 times. All hope was lost. At last they sent for the priest, who came and sat down me and asked me if I was ready to die. I told him I did not care. I had as soon die as not. Death was no terror to me." This was the second time that I had my right mind, and this was on the 9th day. When all was still again in the room, there appeared someone in the room. He stood some distance from me at the opposite side of the room. He asked me in a still small voice if I would like to serve the Lord. I told him I would. He asked me again if I would serve him if I knew the right way. I told him I would, and then he disappeared, and soon I began to get better. Because of this experience, Phineas searched for a church that he could join. He recorded that in 1841, a meeting commenced at Gull Corners under the direction of the Methodists and Congregationalists, which lasted 6 weeks, night and day. And in remembrance of my covenant to serve the Lord if I could find the way, I attended very steady, hoping to get religion. After a while, they invited me to go forward to the anxious seat to be prayed for, telling me that this was the way to be converted. I determined not to neglect anything on my part, so I went, and they prayed for me as hard as they could. After they got through, they asked me with the rest if I did not feel my soul converted. I told them I felt about as common. Then they told me if I would continue to come to the anxious seat every night, that at length I should be converted. After I had been forward several times and finding that I felt no change, they began to lose all hope of me. But finally, as a last resort, they told me if I would take up my cross and pray, that the victory would be gained. This, to be sure, was rather hard before so many people, but being in the habit of praying from my childhood, I had no trouble. I truly felt the Spirit of the Lord resting upon me as I ended and arose. But being questioned as to my feelings about arising to my feet to bear testimony, I answered that I felt very well, but did not know I had anything to testify to. Then they told me that if I would join the church, that no doubt I should be a Christian. I told them I could not tell which one to join. There were so many. But they said that it made no difference, as all were on the way to heaven, only there was a little difference in the discipline, but I could take my choice. I told them that if I could find a church that could heal the sick, as they did in old times, that would be the one for me. Oh, they that would be miracles, they are done away with the death of the ancient apostles. They were only given to establish the church. Since that time, they were not needed, they told me. This rather discouraged me, for I had read in the Bible that the Lord changed not, that his course was one eternal round, and could hardly give up what they said was true. After much reasoning and counseling, I made up my mind to join the Methodists, partly because my wife belonged to them in the East, and partly because they took common men and made preachers of them. And then I thought that they were as near as right as any. So about the 12th day of May, at a 3 days meeting held at Gull Mill, I presented myself for membership with my wife and was received on 6 months probation. I continued to investigate the different creeds and read many discussions with the Universalists and others, and in conversation with my Methodist brethren, I spoke at all times as I felt. Sometimes they found fault with me because I wanted a more liberal salvation for the family of man. I could not believe the Lord had made a part to be saved and a great part to be damned to all eternity, for this would come in contact with the saying that nothing was made in vain. At length I grew more firm in the faith, and as they perceived it, they sent one of their most prominent men to labor with me. We talked a long time, and at last he gave me up for lost. In this conversation, he was many times put to his wit's end to carry his point, and he gave it up and said he should report me to the church. I told him he might as well, for as long as we could not agree, I thought it was better for us to be apart, and they might take my name off as soon as they chose. Phineas had steadily become skeptical of organized religion by the time his sister, Eliza Hall, told him that she had joined the Mormon church. Phineas said later the news came in on the waybill by the mail coach that Joe Smith was killed by a mob in Carthage, Illinois. The news had quite an effect on people, and everyone had something to say about it. Some said he was an imposter and it was a good thing for the world. Some said one thing and some said another. At this time, considerable was said about the doctrine of the Mormons, but nobody seemed to say anything good about it. About Eliza being a Mormon, Phineas said, I only laughed at her and told her to quit talking and send one of her preachers, and that would be the end of the controversy. For my motto was that the one that was the best at proving their position was bound to win. So she said she would send them to preach to me. Says I, that's right, for I have not had a chance for an argument on religion for some time, and I should be glad to have a chance to thrash them and make them haul in their longhorns. That December, some Mormon missionaries came to town giving a meeting. Phineas went with his father and mother and wife, but he only made it as far as the door and then turned around and went home. When the others came home, his father said, "I was always a Mormon and never knew what the devil to call it." "So was I," said his mother. "Well," said Phineas, "I think you must be pretty poor off for names. I don't think it would take me long to find a name to call it." A week later, there was another meeting, and this time Annalisa convinced him to go and stay for the whole meeting. Phineas had a notebook, and he went in search of a pencil to borrow for his note-taking. He went to Father Orr's, and there he found two strangers playing chess by the fire. He wrote, "One of the strangers said that he had a pencil that he would lend me, for he was going to the meeting, and afterward I could return it." I went with my book and candle and placed myself in front of the desk where I could look the preacher fair in the face, determined that not a word should escape, for I was bent on putting down errors if I could find any, which I had no doubt of doing, and that in abundance. When the meeting was in and it was time to open, the two strangers appeared, of which I had borrowed the pencil. One of them opened the meeting by singing in prayer. His name I afterwards found to be Edward M. Webb. After the meeting was opened, the one that handed me the pencil arose, and placing his eyes intently on me, as though he thought I was the only hardened sinner there to contend with, and surely I thought from his appearance that I was more than a match for him, and after collecting, as it appeared to me, all his powers, he slowly began. He said his remarks would be confined to the fall of the church or the setting up of Antichrist. Surely, thought I, that's something new. He proceeded and quoted many passages of the Old and New Testaments, not forgetting his watcher, who was sitting over against him, for he did not presume to quote a word from Scripture without seemingly consulting his feeling or mine concerning how it might be received. For the passage was clearly pointed out, book, chapter, and verse, and then a pause until I had written it down, and he continued this way for about 2.5 hours. When he was done, he gave liberty for anyone to speak that wished. All of a sudden, all eyes were fixed on me, as though they thought I was on hand with any amount of argument to put down any and everything that he had said. But they looked in vain. I was satisfied. I could say nothing, for I knew that what he said was true, and could not be refuted by any testimony that I had. For it was, as I had always told them, that truth would prevail, and it had surely done so at this time, especially over me. After the meeting was over, they came to me privately and asked me why I did not silence him by arising and telling him the truth of the matter, not thinking but I could put him down as I had done others at former times. I answered, "The man has told us the truth, and it was not my province to raise my voice against it, and should not do it. For if they could not understand it, I could." After this, I did not blame Father for saying he was always a Mormon, but did not know what to call it. But it was not exactly so with me, for I had not yet heard enough to convince me that Joseph Smith was a prophet sent from God. The next meeting, I had my own pencil. I placed myself in the same position as before, but when his lecture was about half done, I dropped my pencil and book onto the floor and sat with my mouth open. At least I will say my attention was all taken up, and I thought after it was over as though I had been wrapped in a vision from this time. From then on, I never doubted the truth of Joseph's mission. Phineas continued. When Eliza heard that I had been to hear the Mormons, for fear the truth was not thoroughly planted within me, she sent me all the books and papers that she had, and I began to read and kept it up until I had read all that I could find concerning the matter. Father and Mother began to think that I should be a convert to this new faith, as they could not hear anything from me but Mormonism from day to day. They could see me reading every odd moment, and Mother said the next thing would be, if they did not put a stop to it, I should be off with the Mormons, and that would be the last of me. Finally, I became tired of their abuse, and I went away into the woods and prayed that Father might become changed in his course or be taken out of the way, for I thought for me to always live in that way was more than I could endure. For I had covenanted to serve the Lord, and it would be impossible for me to do it under these circumstances. After I had freed my mind before the Lord, I went home and found Father quite sick with a disease he called the shingles. It came out on his right breast and side. He sent forthwith after the doctor. He soon came and said that if he could not stop them from going around his body, they would kill him. For when they met in the pit of his stomach, they would strike in, and they could not be gotten out again. He continued in this way 2 or 3 days, and I saw they were gradually moving around him. And I began to think that I had done wrong. And finding he grew worse and worse, I began to fear that I should be the cause of his death, or that I might have been unwise, and his blood might be required at my hands. After I had reflected sincerely, I concluded to go and ask the Lord to forgive me for my folly in not bearing more with more patience. So I started for the woods, where I had been before, and there I prayed that the Lord would bear with my weakness and heal my father. After confessing my sins and asking forgiveness, I retraced my steps to the house and asked Annalisa if father was any better. She told me that he appeared better. His breaking out was nearly all gone, and his pain was all gone. Then I knew that the Lord had heard me and had forgiven me for what I felt to lift my soul to God in gratitude for his abundant mercies unto me. In 2 days, father was well. Phineas continued, "After this, when I wanted to read, I kept out of sight in daytime. And when I went to bed and the house was still, I would get up and light a candle and set it on the stand beside the bed, and lie in bed and read from 12 to 3 o'clock a.m., and no one but myself and Annalisa knew anything about it. About this time, I was harrowing the land that we had hired, broken up for wheat. The field was long and the weather was warm, and we had but one yoke of oxen, and they could not go more than once or twice around without stopping to rest. At the stopping place, there was a hollow stump in which I kept a Book of Mormon, and while the oxen were resting, I would go and get it and read. In this way, I read the Book of Mormon and the Voice of Warning, and no one knew anything about it but myself." The 2 sermons which David Savage had preached were all that I had the opportunity of hearing. They had been called home in consequence of the death of Joseph. In the branch of the church at Comstock, about 10 miles from where I lived, there was a conference called to be held the 7th and 8th of September, and all the saints were invited to attend. When the time came, Salmon and Eliza Hall came down and stopped for me and Annalisa to go with them. So we got ready and went. We attended the meeting Saturday, the 7th, and Sunday we went down to the Kalamazoo River and were baptized. And Eliza, ever thoughtful, had brought a change of clothes for us. We then returned to the schoolhouse and were confirmed under the hand of Edward M. Webb and Crandall Dunn. After meeting, we went home. A great inquiry was made to know if we had been baptized. When they found out that we had, then they had ample opportunity to display their tact and talents in refuting the principles I had embraced. But the more they said, the stronger I felt, and the more I felt to maintain it. This is the site that I propose for Phineas and Annalisa's baptism. This is the Kalamazoo River at Comstock. Phineas said they were baptized in the Kalamazoo River and then walked up to the schoolhouse, which doubled as a community meeting place, to be confirmed. There was a schoolhouse just north of this point, about a 10-minute walk up that road. We don't know the exact spot on the river that was accessible for a baptism, but this park next to the road is now an entry spot for the Kalamazoo River, so I like to think there was a spot like this nearby, if not this spot, that they went to be baptized. We have other documentation that missionaries were in Comstock with converts as early as 1840. A Comstock branch is named, and in May 25th, 1844, just 1 month before Joseph and Hiram were killed, Wilford Woodruff and other elders made their way to Michigan, and Wilford recorded in his journal that they called Kalamazoo the finest town we saw since we left Nauvoo. They had a meeting in Comstock on Sunday, May 26th, in a schoolhouse in the morning, and then 3 miles north in another schoolhouse. This is the Prairie Home Cemetery where Phineas Sr. and Irene Churchill Cook are buried. I'm going to show you how you can easily find Phineas Sr. and Irene's graves from the Prairie Home Cemetery sign. And our recording was full of traffic noise, so I'm voicing over myself. Prairie Home Cemetery is located about 2 miles directly south from Phineas Sr. and Irene's land in Richland Township, Michigan. Phineas Sr. died May 20th, 1848, just 2 years after Phineas and Annalisa left for the West. Irene lived for another 22 years dying in 1870. Their daughter Marianne is also buried next to them. She was the one who married Philip Leonard 2.5 weeks after meeting him. She died young in 1851 at age 35, leaving young children. Interestingly, in her will, Irene left a huge sum, $500, to her granddaughter Harriet, one of Marianne's 5 children. But this money came with explicit instructions. I give, devise, and bequeath to my granddaughter Harriet Leonard, daughter of Philip and Mary Leonard, the sum of $500. The said sum of $500 to be under control of my executor, to be by him expended for the sole and only benefit of the said Harriet Leonard, and in no case to go into the hand of her father, P. Leonard. So it sounds like this Philip may not have been on Irene's good side for some reason. Lucy and Reuben Spencer and some other Spencers are also buried next to the Cooks. Lucy was Eliza Cook and Sam and Hall's daughter, and hence Irene's granddaughter. Speaking of Irene, that brings us to our recent genealogy mystery. In her will, which clearly speaks of her children by name and some grandchildren, so we know it is our Irene, she is named Irene Bush. It appears she had remarried. Exploring some earlier land transaction records, we find her buying back the land that she and Phineas lived on from her son-in-law and daughter Sam and Hall and wife, it says here, using the name Irene Forbes. So it appears she was remarried twice, first to a Forbes, then to a Bush. But she's buried next to Phineas Sr., and her headstone reads Irene Cook. So there's no clues there to her remarriages. We had found no other record of her remarriages or who these Forbes and Bush men might be until very recently. I'll describe to you some of the conundrums I encountered researching this and what conclusions I've come to so far. First, Forbes. This land transaction is dated November 18th, 1850, between Irene Forbes and Salmon Hall and wife. I found a marriage record dated the day before, November 17th, 1850, of a Caleb Forbes and Iona Gibson. Now, with the sloppy handwriting, I could see Iona being Irene, but Gibson, I still don't have an answer for that. I found an Irene Gibson in the 1850 census in the household of Josiah Buell and his wife and children, who lived close to Irene and Phineas's land. And he was also named a witness at the wedding of Iona Gibson and Caleb Forbes. And another Irene Cook is not found in the local 1850 census. So I don't know what to do with the name Gibson. But, and I was still not convinced that this bride, Iona Gibson, was our Irene. So I dug some more, and I came across some tax assessments of the land that Phineas and Irene lived on in Richland, Michigan. Before his death in 1848, Phineas Sr. was assessed taxes for his land, and it was described like this. The lot, beginning at the southwest corner of west half of the northwest corner of section 11, north 130 rods, east 80 rods, south 130 rods, west 80 rods, for a total of 65 acres. In 1851, a Caleb Forbes was assessed for taxes on land described as a lot beginning at southwest corner of west half of northwest quarter of section 11, north 130 rods, east 80 rods, south 130 rods, west 80 rods, for a total of 65 acres. The exact same description. So this Caleb Forbes was paying taxes for the land that Phineas and Irene had previously paid taxes for. So with that, I was certain that this Caleb Forbes was Irene's new husband. Caleb Forbes died just 6.5 years later after that marriage certificate on April 3rd, 1857. And I'm continuing to research this Caleb Forbes. I'll add anything I find to Family Search. Less than a year after Caleb Forbes died, Irene Forbes is listed on a marriage certificate to a man named Javesh G. Bush. This is the only marriage certificate found in her name as Irene Forbes to anybody named Bush. There's just a bit of a problem with this marriage certificate. Irene Forbes is listed as 17 years old and her new husband 20, a far cry from the 70 years old that she was. However, I do believe this is her and her new husband. 2 years after this marriage, an 1860 census finds a G.G. Bush and Irene Bush, both aged 72, in Richland. And a map of the area has Phineas and Irene's land labeled J.C. Bush, which is pretty close to Javesh G. Bush, or G.G. Bush. Age 72 in the census definitely matches our Irene, and no other plausible Irenes have been found in the census. So other than the marriage certificate ages, this all seems to fit. So my explanation for the marriage ages is that someone was in the clerk's office copying the information from the marriage into the book and calls out to someone, now how old was Irene Forbes? The answer was 70, and it was misheard as 17. And then how old was Bush? Was met with, I don't know, probably a little bit older than her, and that's how we got 17 and 20. I don't know, it seems plausible to me. Anyway, Irene appears to have married a Javesh or G.G. or J.C. Bush. But who was he? He was listed on the marriage certificate as from Vermilion, though there are a few different Vermilions in a few different states, though likely it was Vermilion, Ohio. And the census has him from Massachusetts, and the 1850 census has him living with, I suppose, a son, James Bush, listed as from New York. So which is it? Well, perhaps all three. I actually don't know how Vermilion fits in yet. But a Bush family with a son named Jabez was found listed in Sheffield, Massachusetts. This family here has a younger brother with the unusual name Ora. I found an Ora Bush moving to Kalamazoo County in 1841, according to his obituary. He lived just a few miles from the Cooks. So that's a good hint that this Jabez Bush from Sheffield, Massachusetts is our Javesh Bush. Ora's obituary also said that his family moved when the children were very young to Marcellus, New York. And I found that records from Marcellus burned about the time that Ora and perhaps Jabez moved to Michigan. So we may have lost any record of their family there or of Jabez's first marriage and children. But I believe Jabez Bush is both from Massachusetts and from New York, that he and his son James, along with brother Ora, perhaps other family members, moved to Kalamazoo County, at least by the 1850 census. I haven't found any death information for Jabez. He did serve in the War of 1812 and was awarded land in Kalamazoo County for his service, as seen in these records. And I'm continuing to research this Bush family. Both Caleb Forbes and Jabez Bush have now been linked to Irene Churchill Cook on Family Search. So we see that Irene was busy for that last 22 years of her life. Her children did not remain long in Kalamazoo County. One son, Darius, moved south to Niles, Michigan, where he was an editor of a newspaper called the Niles Republican. Her son, Daniel, was just north of her in Berry County. Daughter Eliza and Salmon Hall lived for a while in Washington, D.C., and then in Missouri, where they divorced, and Eliza and her son joined Phineas and Annalisa in Garden City, Utah. Her daughter, Lucy Spencer, of course, stayed in Michigan. Mary Ann had died. Of course, Phineas had moved west. Harriet had moved to Livingston County near Detroit. And Irene remained her whole life in Richland, Kalamazoo County, and when she died, she was buried next to her first husband, Phineas Sr. Phineas recorded that the winter after he and Annalise were baptized, he wrote, "An elder by the name of Edward Willard was sent to me to tell me that the time had come for all the saints to gather, for the church was going to move to Vancouver's Island or someplace in the far west. It was not known yet where, but we were required to do as Abraham did, to go to a land that should yet be shown to us." Phineas and Annalisa were living with his parents during the time that they were preparing to move west and join the saints in Nauvoo. Phineas was building and outfitting a wagon, as well as putting up wheat, and Annalisa was stitching a wagon cover. His parents bothered them so much about leaving, even sending the local preacher to belittle them for their beliefs, that Phineas and Annalisa moved out of their house to complete their work. Phineas and Annalisa and their two little girls were finally ready to leave their parents and journey west. When Father found out I was about to get away, he came to the barn where I was at work and said, since I was determined to start off, I should not go without some money. Here is $5, which I make a present to you. I took it and thanked him. This made me $22.50 in my pocket. I had about 10 bushels of wheat, as I supposed. But when I was about to load up, I learned that Father had carried all the wheat to mill. He milled both his wheat and mine together while I was away at work on my wagon. He had ground it all together, and so I had none. I asked him why he had done so. He said that I had no share in it whatever. I told him I had done the labor to raise it, supposed I was entitled to a share of it. He said it did not make any difference if I did. It was his and he should keep it. I told him then if he could live with that, I would do without it. For as it happened, I had a little money left, and as long as that lasted, I should not starve. I went to loading up, but Mother finally told him if she was in his place, she would let me have a little flour. Finally, he consented and came out and told me to bring in a sack and he would let me have some flour. So I did, and he measured me out 50 or 60 pounds of flour, and that was all I could have. I had a water keg, which I intended to take, but it could not be found. Also a trowel, someone put away for safekeeping, but I was determined nothing should stop me. I put up what I had and rolled out. As I drove out the gate, I said goodbye. Mother, as she stood in the door, seemed to be somewhat affected, but Father stood by and said, never mind, he'll be back by winter. Says I, Father, this is the last time you will ever see me this side of the grave. Then I shall die before winter? He said. No, says I, you will live long enough to find out I am not so easy to back out this time. Phineas concluded, I bade farewell to my home and all that seemed dear to me as far as this world is concerned. The gospel was all that seemed of any worth to me. I was determined to serve God the rest of my days. My heart was heavy with grief at leaving my father and my mother, although they had been somewhat unkind in their treatment to me. I knew that his days were not many on this earth, as I told Eliza that in 2 or 3 years he would be laid low in the grave, and it would be a sorrowful time, and I did not wish to witness it. He was a good man and always kind to his family, as a general thing, but Mother used to scold him so many times for not doing as she thought was as it should be. And he sometimes would resent it and sometimes say nothing, but get off and go out of hearing to get out of the noise. Mother was an industrious woman and always was for going ahead and making money. So much so that it was hard for her to treat her family as they should be. But still, she learned everybody that came to dwell with her how to be industrious and prudent. She was very saving and prudent in all her business and taught her children to be the same. I told her that she had many years to live, that she would yet see the day that she was glad I was a Mormon. Parting with Salmon and Eliza Hall was difficult. They had planned to come with the Cooks, but Salmon backed out at the last minute. As Phineas and Aunt Eliza rode on without them, Phineas mused, I felt the power of God resting upon me. Here the dark clouds of despair broke away and the light of the Spirit dawned gently on my mind. As we proceeded on our journey, I grew lighter and lighter until I felt as cheerful as in former times. That was the end of Phineas and Aunt Eliza in Michigan. Thank you for joining us as we discussed Phineas and his family's adventures in Michigan. If you have any feedback for us, please feel free to contact us at cookfamilynewsletter@gmail.com. We have just this month published a beautifully illustrated children's book of Phineas's adventures in Michigan with stories and illustrations that you saw tonight in this presentation, and it's available on Amazon. Other books we've published that are also available on Amazon include the 3rd edition of Phineas's memoirs with pictures, maps, and annotations, letters, and writings from his children to fill out his entire life. We have published the journal that Aunt Eliza kept for the last 2 years of her life in Garden City in this lovely volume. Another children's book we've published just this year is about our Revolutionary War ancestor, Daniel Cook Jr., and the stories that are Phineas related about his grandfather's service during the war. Bryson Cook has delved into the service record of Daniel Cook Jr. and authored this very informative book about his military service and exactly why he is called Captain Daniel Cook. Another children's story we have published is Battling the Bear, a Michigan story. We detailed Phineas's role in founding Goshen, Utah, and being its first bishop in this volume. And heading back to our British roots, Bryson Cook explores what we know and don't know about our original Cook ancestor who came from England in the early 1600s. He gives excellent direction for further research needed on Henry Cook. Finally, our last children's book, this is about Alonzo Howland Cook's wives' parents, Annie, Bryson, and Lashbrook Laker. Their incredible story of joining the church and coming to America. All of these are available on Amazon and sold at cost. A longtime goal of many in our organization has been realized this year when David Cook applied for membership in the Sons of the American Revolution organization using evidence recently found by Bryson Cook about Daniel Cook Jr.'s service in the war. In our next newsletter, we will detail how you can now reference Dave Cook's application to apply for your own memberships if you would like. And remember, save the date for our next in-person Cookorama next year in Salt Lake City. We could use some help planning it and carrying out our plans. So if you're interested, please contact us at cookfamilynewsletter@gmail.com. And our organization can always use helping hands with a variety of things, including communications, family search and temple work, genealogy research, and publications. So go ahead and email us if you would like to get involved a little bit or a lot. Again, we're at cookfamilynewsletter@gmail.com. This presentation will be available to watch on our YouTube channel.